This is my seat. I paid for it. I'm not moving.
You don't belong in first class. Madison Reed said it loud enough for the whole cabin to hear. Then she ripped Ethan Walker's boarding pass straight down the middle. The sound was small, dry, paper tearing under fluorescent light. But inside the first-class cabin of Summit Horizon Flight 487, it landed like a slap. Ethan stood in the aisle with one hand still resting on the top of seat 2A. He wore a plain black t-shirt, dark jeans, and worn gray sneakers. No watch, no suit, no polished leather briefcase. Nothing about him announced money. Nothing about him warned Madison that the quiet man she had just humiliated could end her career with one phone call. Around him, the cabin froze. A man in a navy blazer lowered his newspaper. A woman, with silver hair, pressed one hand to her pearls. Somewhere behind row 3, a phone camera clicked on with a soft electronic chirp. Ethan heard it. Madison heard it too. She lifted her chin anyway. "Sir," she said, her smile tight and empty, "economy boarding is behind you." Ethan looked at the torn pieces of his boarding pass in her hand. His face did not change. Only his breathing did. Slow in, slower out. "My seat is 2A, he said. Madison's eyes moved over him again. Shirt, jeans, sneakers, brown skin, calm face. She made her decision before she ever checked the truth. That seat has been reassigned. From the galley, Tyler Brooks stepped forward, wiping his hands on a napkin like this was an inconvenience beneath him. He was younger than Madison, broad-shouldered, with a grin that came too easily. "Come on, man," Tyler said. "Let's not make this harder than it needs to be. First class gets confusing sometimes." A few passengers shifted. Some looked away. Some watched harder. Ethan reached into his back pocket and pulled out his driver's license. Then his phone, with the digital boarding pass still glowing on the screen. Ethan Walker, seat 2A, paid in full. Confirmed this morning. Madison barely glanced down. Her nostrils flared. To her, the facts were not facts yet. They were obstacles. "Anyone can screenshot something," she said. The words chilled the air. In row 4, Grace Miller, a retired nurse from Des Moines, with soft hands and sharp eyes, stopped unwrapping a piece of peppermint candy. She had spent 40 years reading people in hospital rooms. Pain, fear, lies. She saw none of that in Ethan. She saw restraint, the kind that cost something. Across the aisle, Adam Collins, a widower flying to Los Angeles to visit his daughter, slowly raised his phone. His thumb trembled before he pressed record. Madison saw him. "Sir, please put that away," she snapped. Adam did not move. "I think I'll keep it on." Ethan looked toward him for half a second. Not gratitude. Not fear. Something heavier. A silent recognition that witnesses mattered when power tried to rewrite reality. Then Madison stepped closer. Too close. "You people always think if you stand here long enough, someone will get tired and give you what you want." The cabin went still in a different way now. Even Tyler's grin faded for a beat. Ethan's eyes lifted to hers, cold, steady, controlled. "You should be very careful," he said. Madison laughed once, sharp and ugly. Or what? Behind her, near the cockpit door, Captain Robert Hayes appeared with a coffee cup in his hand, and impatience on his face. He had not seen the scan. He had not seen the ticket before it was torn. He had not heard the first insult. But he saw Madison's anger, Ethan's stillness, and a cabin full of eyes waiting for authority to choose a side. He chose fast. "What's the problem here?" Madison turned. relief flashing across her face. Passenger refusing to leave first class. Ethan slowly picked up the torn pieces of his boarding pass from the floor. For the first time, his jaw tightened. He had come aboard quietly for a reason. No entourage, no executive greeting, no special treatment. Just a seat, a name, and a company culture he needed to see with his own eyes. Now he had seen enough. Captain Hayes looked at Ethan. "Sir, if my crew says there's an issue, we need to resolve it before departure." Ethan folded the torn paper once in his palm. "There is an issue," he said, "but it isn't me." Ethan Walker had not dressed like a billionaire because he did not want to be treated like one. That was the whole point. That morning, long before Madison Reed tore his boarding pass in half, Ethan had stood in the quiet bedroom of his lakefront condo in Chicago and looked at two versions of himself. One hung inside the closet, a charcoal suit from a tailor in New York, handmade shoes, a watch worth more than most cars, the uniform of power, the armor people respected before they respected the man. The other version lay folded on the chair, a black t-shirt, dark jeans, worn sneakers, ordinary clothes, human clothes. He chose the second version, not because he was ashamed of wealth, not because he wanted drama, but because Summit Horizon Airlines had been bleeding trust in a way no spreadsheet could fully explain. For 6 months, complaints had landed in folders no one wanted to open. Older passengers ignored at boarding. Families questioned twice. Black and brown travelers asked for extra identification. Working-class passengers treated like mistakes when they entered premium cabins. Public relations had polished the language until the truth disappeared under words like isolated incident and misunderstanding. Ethan did not believe in polished language. He believed in patterns. At 42, he had built his career by seeing what other people dismissed. He had grown up on the South Side, raised by a mother who cleaned office buildings at night, and a father who drove city buses until his knees gave out. They taught him that dignity was not something a uniform could grant or take away. But America had tried to teach him something else. That respect often arrived only after proof. A title, a bank account, a name printed on a door. Now his name was printed on board documents. His signature could move markets. His company owned a controlling interest in the airline Madison served with such cold confidence. But no one at gate B14 had been told he was coming. That was deliberate. At 11:30 that morning, his assistant, Rachel Adams, had called while he was riding to O'Hare in the back of a black SUV. "The board still thinks this is risky," Rachel said. Ethan watched traffic slide past the window. Delivery trucks, commuters, a man in a Cubs cap eating from a paper bag at a bus stop. "Good," he said. "Risk makes people honest. They're worried you'll be recognized. I won't be." "You're sure you don't want security nearby?" His eyes stayed on the city. "If I need security to see the truth, then it isn't the truth." Rachel had gone quiet. She had worked for him for 8 years. She knew that tone. Calm, but immovable. It meant his decision had already been made. At O'Hare, Ethan moved through the terminal like any other traveler. No special escort, no lounge announcement, no smiling executive waiting with a handshake. He bought coffee from a tired woman at a kiosk and called her by the name on her badge, Denise. She blinked, surprised to be seen, then smiled like the day had briefly become lighter. He noticed everything. The gate agent greeting a white businessman by name, then barely looking at a young black father traveling with 2 children. The couple in expensive coats rolling their eyes when a janitor's cart slowed their path. The way certain passengers were assumed to belong, while others had to keep proving they were not in the way. By the time boarding began, Ethan's chest carried a familiar weight. Not anger yet. Something colder. Evidence. Inside the aircraft, first class glowed with soft amber light. Leather seats. Crystal glasses. The low private hum of money, pretending to be peace. Ethan found seat 2A and placed one hand on the headrest. For a moment, he let himself breathe. Then Madison appeared. She saw the clothes before the ticket. She saw the sneakers before the name. She saw the man she had already invented in her mind. And now, as Captain Hayes stood in the aisle, and the torn boarding pass rested in Ethan's palm, the secret investigation had become something sharper. Not a report, not a memo, a live demonstration. Ethan looked from Madison to Tyler, then to the captain, who had already chosen convenience over truth. "You should check your system," Ethan said. Madison's mouth tightened. "We already know what the system says." "No," Ethan thought. "You know what you wanted to say." Madison Reed did not hear the warning in Ethan's voice, because people like her rarely recognized danger when it arrived quietly. She heard defiance. She heard disrespect. She heard a man she had already placed beneath her, refusing to stay there. Captain Robert Hayes set his coffee cup on the narrow galley counter and stepped fully into the aisle. His face had hardened into the expression he used when passengers delayed departure. Not anger exactly. Something colder, procedure without curiosity. "Sir," he said, "my crew tells me you've refused a seating correction." Ethan looked at him. "Your crew destroyed my boarding pass." Madison lifted the torn paper pieces like evidence against him instead of evidence against herself, because it wasn't valid. Tyler Brooks leaned one shoulder against the galley wall, arms folded. His mouth bent into a half smile, but his eyes were restless. He knew the cabin had shifted. He could feel the phones, the watching, the silent judgment gathering behind the leather seats. Captain Hayes held out his hand. "Let me see your identification." Ethan handed him his driver's license and phone. No hesitation, no tremor, just a steady arm extended into a crowd that had already made him prove too much. Hayes glanced at the license, then the screen. For one brief second, the truth was right there in his hand. Ethan Walker, seat 2A, first class, confirmed. The captain saw it. Madison saw him see it. Tyler saw it too. That was when Madison moved quickly. "Captain," she said, lowering her voice, "the system showed a reassignment. I checked it before boarding. We have premium guests who were promised that seat." Ethan's eyes slid toward her. Promised by whom? Madison blinked. The question cut too clean. Before she could answer, a voice rose from the front of the cabin. "Is this going to take much longer?" Charles Bennett stood near the divider curtain, one hand resting on his wife Margaret's lower back. He was 58, silver-haired, red-faced, and dressed in a tan sport coat that looked more expensive than tasteful. Margaret, 55, wore cream silk, diamonds, and the faint expression of someone smelling smoke in a nice restaurant. Charles looked at Ethan, then past him. Not at him, past him. "We were told 2A would be available," Charles said. Ethan turned slowly. "By the airline?" Charles gave a short laugh. "By people who know how things work." Margaret touched her husband's sleeve. Her smile was soft, but her eyes were not. "Honey, let them handle it. We don't need to argue with him." "Him." Grace Miller heard it. The small word, the old poison inside it. Her hand tightened around the peppermint candy, until the wrapper crackled. Adam Collins kept recording. His breathing had changed. He had spent 68 years avoiding trouble, church boards, school meetings, neighborhood disputes. He had always believed calm people could reason their way through ugly moments. Now he was watching calmness get punished. Captain Hayes handed Ethan's phone back. "Mr. Walker, I understand there may be confusion, but we need to get this flight moving." "There is no confusion," Ethan said. "There is a seat assignment." Madison's face flushed. "You're being difficult." "No," Ethan said. "I'm being accurate." The words landed hard. A few passengers shifted again. Someone whispered, "He's right." Someone else murmured, "Just move him already." That second voice came from behind Margaret Bennett, an older man in a golf sweater who had not looked at Ethan once without suspicion. His wife leaned close and whispered, "People don't act like this unless they're hiding something." Ethan heard her. He had heard versions of that sentence his entire life. In banks, in hotels, in boardrooms, at restaurants where waiters asked if he was waiting for someone else before offering a table. Every memory flashed and vanished behind his eyes. He did not let one of them reach his face. Tyler stepped forward, trying to reclaim control. "Sir, we can put you in economy with extra legroom. You'll still get to Los Angeles." Ethan looked at him. "I bought first class," Madison snapped. "And we are telling you that seat is no longer available. It became unavailable after I sat in it." The cabin went silent. Even the engines seemed to lower their breath. Captain Hayes' jaw tightened. He did not like being cornered by logic in front of passengers. Authority, to him, depended on motion. Keep boarding moving. Keep voices down. Keep the crew protected. The truth was useful only when it did not delay the schedule. "Mr. Walker," he said, "I'm giving you a choice. Accept the reseating or step off the aircraft while we verify your documents." Ethan stared at him for a long second. Then he picked up the torn halves of his boarding pass, folded them once, and placed them on the armrest of seat 2A, like an exhibit before a jury. "You are not verifying documents," he said. "You are trying to make your mistake disappear." Madison's eyes sharpened. "Security," she said. Captain Hayes did not stop her, and that was the moment Ethan knew the investigation had moved from culture to liability. The word security moved through the first-class cabin like smoke under a closed door. No one breathed normally after that. Madison Reed touched the radio clipped near her shoulder, but her fingers were not as steady as she wanted them to be. She could feel the passengers watching. She could feel Adam Collins' phone pointed at her. She could feel Grace Miller's eyes, old and tired and unafraid, studying her like a woman who had seen too many lies dressed up as policy. "Ground security to aircraft," Madison said. "We have a passenger refusing crew instructions in first class." Ethan sat down in seat 2A. Not fast, not dramatic. He simply lowered himself into the seat he had paid for, placed both hands on the armrests, and looked forward. The movement was quiet, but it shook the cabin more than shouting would have. Tyler Brooks stepped closer. "You really want to do this?" Ethan did not look at him. "I am already doing it." Tyler gave a short, nervous laugh and glanced toward Madison. He wanted her confidence to make him brave, but Madison's jaw was clenched too tight now. A thin red flush climbed from her collar to her cheeks. Captain Hayes stood over Ethan with the stiff posture of a man who believed height was the same thing as authority. "Mr. Walker, remaining seated after a crew instruction can be considered interference with flight operations." Ethan turned his head slowly. Then be specific, Captain. What instruction did I violate? Hayes blinked. It was a simple question. Too simple. The kind that left no room for fog. Madison stepped in quickly. You refused a lawful reseating order. Based on what? Operational necessity. What operation? Her lips parted. No answer came. From behind them, Charles Bennett sighed loudly, performing exhaustion for the room. This is absurd. Some of us have connections. Some of us have actual business to conduct. Ethan looked at him then, not with anger, with measurement. What business? Charles frowned, caught off guard. Excuse me? You said actual business. What business? Margaret Bennett tightened her grip on her purse strap. She did not like the question. It placed Charles on the same level as the man they were trying to move. It asked for proof. People like them were not used to being asked for proof. Charles scoffed. That's none of your concern. Neither is my seat yours, Ethan said. A murmur rippled through the cabin. Grace Miller's mouth softened, almost into a smile. Adam Collins kept recording, his thumb firm now, no longer trembling. In row 3, a young man in a ball cap whispered, "He got him there." Madison heard it and snapped her head around. Everyone, please remain seated and stop recording. No one stopped. That was when Lily Parker appeared near the galley curtain. She was 23, new to the job, still wearing the too bright expression of someone who believed rules were supposed to protect people. Her hands were clasped in front of her uniform. Her eyes kept moving from Ethan to Madison, to the torn boarding pass on the armrest. Madison, Lily said softly. Madison turned. Not now. Lily swallowed. Her throat moved visibly. She had been standing near the scanner when Ethan boarded. She had seen the screen flash green. She had seen the seat assignment. 2A. Confirmed. No alert. No warning. No reassignment. Her stomach twisted as she watched the lie grow legs. I think his scan was valid, Lily said. The cabin heard her. Madison's face changed instantly. Not fear, fury. Go back to the galley. But I saw it. Lily. One word. Sharp as a blade. Lily froze. Tyler stared at her with warning in his eyes. Captain Hayes looked annoyed, not curious. That hurt her more than Madison's anger. The captain was supposed to care about truth. Instead, he looked at Lily like she had spilled coffee on a schedule. Ethan looked at the young attendant. For the first time since security had been called, something human softened in his expression. Thank you, he said. Lily's eyes shone, but she stepped back. As she did, her hand slipped into her jacket pocket and tapped the voice memo app already running on her phone. She had started recording after Madison ripped the boarding pass. She had not known why then. Now she did. Outside the aircraft door, heavy footsteps sounded on the jet bridge. Slow, official, getting closer. Madison straightened her uniform. Tyler lifted his chin. Captain Hayes exhaled through his nose like the solution had finally arrived. Ethan remained still. He heard the footsteps. He saw the cameras. He felt the whole cabin leaning toward the moment. And in his pocket, his phone buzzed once. Rachel Adams. Board notified. Awaiting your signal. 2 security officers entered the aircraft with the slow confidence of people accustomed to making rooms go quiet. The first was Dana Mitchell, 39, compact and sharp-eyed, with her dark hair pulled into a tight bun and one hand resting near her belt. The second, a younger officer named Kyle Ramsey, stayed half a step behind her, scanning the passengers, the phones, the faces. He saw the tension before he understood it. He saw a black man sitting still, a white flight attendant standing rigid, a captain with his jaw locked. A cabin full of cameras. That combination never meant simple. Dana stopped beside row 2. "Sir, I'm Officer Mitchell with airport security. The crew says you're refusing to comply." Ethan looked up at her. "I'm refusing to give up a seat I paid for." Madison stepped in before Dana could respond. He has been argumentative since boarding. He presented questionable documentation, refused a reseating order, and is now interfering with departure. Grace Miller sat forward. "That is not what happened." Madison turned so fast her blonde ponytail swung against her collar. "Ma'am, please remain out of this." Grace's face did not move. She had spoken to surgeons, grieving families, and dying men who were less condescending than Madison Reed. "I saw him show his ticket," Grace said. "I saw you tear it." A low murmur moved through the cabin. Adam Collins raised his phone higher. "I have it on video." Tyler Brooks muttered under his breath. "Of course you do." Dana heard him. Her eyes flicked toward him, then back to Ethan. She was not careless. She had worked O'Hare long enough to know that uniforms did not always tell the truth. Still, procedure pulled at her like a leash. The crew had authority. The flight could not depart with a passenger dispute unresolved. Every minute created pressure. Every phone created risk. "Mr. Walker," she said, reading his name from the phone screen Ethan had placed on the armrest. "Would you be willing to step off the aircraft so we can verify everything at the gate?" "No." The answer was quiet. It still cracked through the cabin. Kyle shifted behind Dana. Captain Hayes exhaled hard, as if Ethan had just confirmed every suspicion. Dana lowered her voice. "Sir, I'm trying to keep this from escalating." Ethan looked at her carefully. He saw the conflict behind her eyes. She was not Madison. She was not Tyler. She had not started this. But now she stood at the edge of it, one decision away from becoming part of the same machinery. "So am I," he said. Madison laughed once. "By refusing to move, by refusing to let a lie become official." Dana's jaw tightened. That sentence landed somewhere personal. She had worn a badge for 12 years. She knew exactly how quickly a bad report could harden into truth. Words typed into a system could outlive the people who spoke them. Behind her, Charles Bennett stepped forward with theatrical impatience. "Officer, with respect, this has gone on long enough. My wife and I were promised that seat. We paid for premium service, not a courtroom." Margaret Bennett placed one hand over her chest, as if the sight of Ethan sitting had physically wounded her. "We have been loyal customers for years." Ethan turned his head. "Then sit in your assigned seats." Charles's face darkened. "You know, this attitude is exactly the problem." "What attitude?" Ethan asked. Charles opened his mouth. Stopped. The phones were too visible now. Madison came to his rescue. "This is not about anyone's attitude. This is about compliance." Lily Parker stood near the galley, pale and silent, her phone recording inside her jacket pocket. Her heart pounded so hard, she felt it in her wrists. She wanted to speak again. She wanted to say the scan had been green. She wanted to say Madison had barely looked before deciding. But fear pressed its hand over her mouth. Rent, student loans, a probationary job, a supervisor who could ruin her before her career even began. Then she looked at Ethan. He was alone in the seat, but not small. That steadied her. Dana reached for the torn boarding pass on the armrest. "May I?" Ethan nodded. She unfolded the two halves carefully. The paper was ripped through the middle, but the name was visible. Ethan Walker. The seat was visible. 2A. The barcode was damaged, but not the truth. Dana looked at Madison. "You tore this?" Madison's expression flickered. He became disruptive. "That is not what I asked." The cabin held its breath. For the first time, Madison Reed looked less like authority and more like a woman standing too close to the fire she had set. Before she could answer, Ethan's phone buzzed again. This time, the screen lit up, where everyone near row 2 could see it. Rachel Adams. Legal team ready. Board members online. Give the word. The message glowed on Ethan's phone, like a match struck in a dark room. Legal team ready. Board members online. Give the word. Dana Mitchell saw enough of the screen to understand that this was not a normal passenger dispute. Her gaze shifted from the phone to Ethan's face. His calm no longer looked passive. It looked prepared. Madison saw it too, but she understood it differently. To her, it was another performance, another trick, another attempt to look important. "Who are you texting?" she demanded. Ethan placed the phone face down on the armrest. "Someone who needs to know what is happening." Tyler gave a breathy laugh. "Let me guess. Your lawyer?" "Among others." That answer landed badly. Captain Hayes stepped forward. "Mr. Walker, threatening legal action will not change the crew's authority on this aircraft." "I haven't threatened anyone," Ethan said. "I've documented misconduct." Madison's face tightened. "Misconduct? You walked into first class with a questionable ticket and refused instructions." Grace Miller rose halfway from her seat. Her knees were stiff, and her husband used to tease her that she stood like an old church bell, slow but impossible to ignore. Her voice carried the same way. He did not walk in with a questionable ticket. He walked in with a valid one. I saw it before she tore it. Madison turned on her. "Ma'am, sit down." Grace did not sit. No. The word was soft, but it shook something loose. Adam Collins stood next. He was not a bold man. His daughter often told him he apologized to furniture when he bumped into it. But his phone was recording, and his conscience had finally grown louder than his fear. "I've got the whole thing," Adam said. She barely looked at his pass before she ripped it. Charles Bennett rolled his eyes. "Oh, for heaven's sake!" Margaret leaned toward him, whispering, "This is becoming embarrassing." Ethan heard her and almost looked at her. Almost. But he kept his eyes on Dana Mitchell. She was the hinge now. Every room had one. The person who could either repeat the lie or stop it from becoming official. Dana unfolded the torn pass again. "Captain, I need the manifest pulled up." Madison stiffened. "Officer, this is an internal airline matter." Dana looked at her. "You called security. That made it my matter." A ripple moved through the cabin. Small, electric. Lily Parker lowered her head to hide the flicker of relief on her face. She had never heard anyone speak to Madison that way, not firmly, not cleanly, not without fear. Captain Hayes reluctantly reached for the tablet mounted near the galley. He tapped the screen with short, irritated movements. Madison moved beside him, too close.
"Let me handle it,"
she said. "I can pull the manifest," he replied. "I said I already checked. Then it should match." The silence after that was sharp enough to cut skin. Tyler looked down at his shoes. Madison's throat moved. Ethan watched everything, the tiny panic at the edge of Madison's mouth. The way Captain Hayes' annoyance shifted into suspicion, the way Dana's shoulders squared as the truth began forcing its way into the room. The tablet loaded. Captain Hayes searched seat 2A. His brow tightened. He tapped again, then once more. "What is it?" Dana asked. Hayes did not answer immediately. Madison's voice turned brittle. System glitch. It happens. Ethan leaned back slightly. What does it show? Captain Hayes stared at the screen. It shows seat 2A, currently assigned to Charles Bennett. Charles straightened, like a man hearing his name announced at a country club dinner. Margaret smiled faintly, but Dana did not smile. Currently? Hayes looked at her. Dana's eyes narrowed. Can you see the change history? Madison stepped in quickly. That is not necessary. Ethan's voice came low from the seat. It is absolutely necessary. Captain Hayes hesitated. His thumb hovered over the screen. For the first time, he looked less like a captain and more like a man standing at a locked door, afraid of what waited behind it. Dana said, "Open it." He did. The cabin seemed to shrink around the glow of the tablet. There it was. Seat 2A had been assigned to Ethan Walker at booking, confirmed at check-in, confirmed at boarding scan, then changed after boarding had begun, changed by crew access. Madison Reed. The name sat on the screen in plain black letters. No emotion, no argument, no escape. Lily Parker closed her eyes. Adam's phone captured the captain's face as color drained from it. Grace whispered, "Lord have mercy." Ethan slowly picked up his phone and turned it over. Then he called Rachel Adams. When she answered, his voice was quiet enough to make everyone lean in. "Rachel," he said, "send the file to the board. Full escalation. Now." No one spoke after Ethan ended the call. The silence was heavier than shouting. Captain Hayes stared at the tablet as though the screen had betrayed him. Madison Reed could no longer force confidence onto her face. The color had drained from it, leaving only panic struggling to hide behind years of practiced authority. Dana Mitchell broke the silence. "Miss Reed," she said evenly, "did you manually change seat 2A after the passenger boarded?" Madison answered too quickly. "It was operational." "That was not my question. I had discretion." Dana did not blink. "Did you change it?" Madison hesitated. 1 second. 2. 3. Yes. The word landed like a hammer. Charles Bennett spun toward her. "You said the seat was ours." Madison looked at him with desperate eyes. "It was supposed to be." "Supposed to be?" Margaret asked, her voice suddenly thin. "What does that mean?" Madison swallowed. "There was an accommodation request." "For us?" Charles demanded. She looked away. That tiny movement answered everything. Charles felt the blood leave his face. He had believed the airline had upgraded him because of loyalty, because of status, because people like him deserved exceptions. Instead, someone had broken company policy to satisfy his complaint. "You told me it was approved," he whispered. Madison did not answer. Grace Miller shook her head slowly. "So you stole his seat?" "No," Madison snapped. "It wasn't like that." Grace's blue eyes never left her. "What would you call taking something that belongs to someone else because you think another person deserves it more?" Madison had no answer. Tyler Brooks suddenly realized he was standing on the wrong side of history. He replayed every moment in his mind. Laughing, blocking the aisle, threatening Ethan, backing Madison without asking a single question. His stomach tightened. "Madison," he said quietly, "you told me his boarding pass wasn't valid." "I thought it wasn't. You said you checked." "I did." "No." Lily Parker spoke for the first time in several minutes. Her voice shook, but she did not stop. "You barely looked at it." Every head turned toward her. Lily's breathing became uneven, yet she forced herself forward until she stood beside Dana Mitchell. "I was at the scanner. His boarding pass showed green. Seat 2A. I remember because I welcomed him into first class." Madison stared at her in disbelief. "You're making a mistake." "No." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "I made the mistake when I stayed quiet." The words hit harder than accusations. Captain Hayes lowered the tablet. He looked at Lily. "You're certain?" "Yes." Dana folded her arms. "Anyone else?" Adam Collins slowly raised his hand. "I have video from before Officer Mitchell arrived." Charles turned toward him. "You recorded all of this?" "My daughter told me to always record when something feels wrong." "Can we see it?" Dana asked. Adam nodded and walked carefully toward them. The video began. The entire first-class cabin watched together. There was Ethan presenting the boarding pass. There was Madison taking it. There was barely a glance. Then the sharp, ripping sound. The recording captured every face. Grace gasping. Tyler stepping closer. Charles looking satisfied. Margaret smiling with relief. And Ethan standing perfectly still. Not yelling. Not threatening. Not resisting. Simply watching someone destroy proof that he belonged there. When the video ended, nobody moved. Captain Hayes closed his eyes for a brief moment. He had spent 28 years protecting procedures, yet he had accepted Madison's version without asking for evidence. He had almost ordered security to remove an innocent passenger. His voice sounded older when he finally spoke. "Mr. Walker," Ethan looked at him. "I owe you an apology." Ethan said nothing. The captain continued. "I failed to verify the facts before exercising my authority." Dana glanced toward Ethan. "You are under no obligation to accept that apology." "I know," Ethan replied. Captain Hayes lowered his head. "I also need to know something." "What?" "Who exactly is Rachel Adams?" The question floated through the cabin. Madison looked at Ethan again. For the first time, real fear replaced embarrassment. Rachel had not sounded like family. She had not sounded like a friend. She had sounded like someone giving orders. Ethan picked up his phone once more. Another message had appeared. The sender this time was not Rachel. It displayed only 3 words. Chairman Daniel Brooks. "We are watching." Ethan looked up slowly. His eyes moved across Madison, across Captain Hayes, across Charles and Margaret Bennett, across every frightened face in first class. Then he slipped the phone back into his pocket. "My assistant," he said calmly, "works for the board." The cabin froze. No one breathed, because for the first time, everyone understood the same terrifying possibility. The quiet man they had spent the last hour humiliating might not be an ordinary passenger at all. The possibility spread faster than fear. It passed from one seat to another without anyone saying it out loud. It sat in the silver-haired woman's frozen hands. It trembled in Tyler Brooks's lowered eyes. It tightened around Madison Reed's throat until every breath felt borrowed. Ethan Walker was not supposed to be powerful. That was the whole mistake. He was supposed to be embarrassed into silence. He was supposed to take the economy seat, swallow the insult, accept a voucher, and disappear into the back of the plane. Madison had counted on that. Tyler had counted on that. Captain Hayes had nearly built an official record around that. But Ethan had not moved. Now the cabin understood why. Captain Hayes' tablet chimed. The sound was small, but it struck him like a warning bell. He looked down. A priority internal alert had flashed across the airline operations system. His eyes scanned the first line once, then again. Immediate hold. Flight 487. Do not remove passenger Ethan Walker. Executive review in progress. His hand tightened around the tablet. Dana Mitchell saw the change in his face. "Captain?" Hayes swallowed. "Operations just placed the flight on hold." Madison's head snapped toward him. What? He did not look at her. Executive review. Charles Bennett let out a sharp breath. This is insane. Because of him, Ethan turned his eyes toward Charles. Because of what was done to me. Charles looked away first. That small surrender said more than any apology could have. Margaret Bennett sat down slowly in an empty aisle seat, her pearls shifting against her neck. Her pride had drained into something pale and frightened. She had wanted a better seat. She had not wanted to be part of a public scandal. Not at her age. Not with phones recording. Not with her grandchildren able to see it online by dinner. Adam Collins' phone buzzed in his hand. Then again. Then again. He glanced down. His daughter had texted him. Dad, your video is going viral. News accounts are reposting it. Are you okay? Adam blinked. He had sent it to her minutes earlier, thinking only that someone outside the plane should have a copy. She had posted it. The internet had grabbed it with both hands. He looked up at Ethan. Mr. Walker. Ethan turned. Adam's voice was hoarse. My daughter says the video is online now. The cabin shifted. Madison closed her eyes. Tyler whispered, Oh no. Grace Miller looked at Adam's phone, then at Madison. Her face held no pleasure, only sadness. The sadness of someone who had lived long enough to know that some people only feared wrongdoing when witnesses arrived. Dana stepped aside and spoke quietly into her radio. This is Officer Mitchell on Summit Horizon 487. We have a developing civil rights and internal misconduct issue. Passenger appears to have valid documentation. Crew record alteration confirmed on manifest history. Request supervisor and airport legal liaison at the gate. Madison stared at her. Why would you say civil rights? Dana turned. Because that is what this may become. The words stripped the oxygen from the aisle. Captain Hayes rubbed one hand over his mouth. He wanted to rewind. Back to the first moment. Back to when he could have asked Madison one more question. Back to when Ethan placed his phone in his hand and showed him the truth. But authority had momentum. Once misused, it did not simply stop. It crashed. Lily Parker stood near the galley curtain, shaking. Her phone was still recording in her pocket. She felt sick, not because the truth was coming out, but because she had almost let it be buried. Ethan saw her trembling. You did the right thing, he said. Lily looked at him, startled. I should have done it sooner. Sooner is always easier to see afterward. That gentleness broke something in her. She pressed her lips together, fighting tears. Madison watched the exchange with a twisted expression. You're enjoying this. Ethan's face hardened. No, he said. I am enduring it. The cabin went still again. This is not entertainment, he continued. This is what happens when a person's dignity becomes negotiable in a room full of people who want comfort more than truth. No one challenged him. No one could. Then Ethan's phone rang. This time, it was not Rachel. The name on the screen made Captain Hayes step back, as if the device itself had authority. Daniel Brooks, chairman of Summit Horizon Airlines. Ethan answered on speaker. A deep voice filled the first-class cabin. Mr. Walker, the chairman said, the board is assembled. Madison's hand flew to her mouth. Tyler turned white. Captain Hayes stared at Ethan like he was finally seeing the man in seat 2A. The chairman continued. We are ready when you are, Ethan. And with that single sentence, the mask began to fall. Ethan did not answer the chairman right away. He let the silence breathe. Every person in that cabin felt the weight of it. Madison Reed stood frozen beside the galley, one hand still near her radio, as if the tool that had summoned security could somehow summon mercy now. Tyler Brooks kept his eyes on the floor. Captain Hayes held the tablet against his chest, like a man shielding himself from his own mistake. Daniel Brooks's voice came again through the phone. "Ethan, are you safe?" That single question changed the room. Not Mr. Walker, not Sir. Ethan, a first name spoken by the chairman of the airline, with concern, familiarity, and the kind of respect no ordinary passenger received. Madison's knees weakened. Charles Bennett looked at Margaret. Margaret looked at her hands. Dana Mitchell's expression tightened with understanding. She did not know exactly who Ethan was yet, but she knew power when the room suddenly bent around it. "I'm safe," Ethan said. For now. The words were calm. That made them worse. Chairman Brooks exhaled on the line. Paper rustled somewhere on his end. A boardroom, leather chairs, glass walls, men and women in suits staring at an emergency conference screen, watching a company's polished public image split open in real time. "We have received the manifest history," Brooks said. "We have received video evidence from a passenger. We have also received an audio file from a crew member." Lily Parker's face flushed. Madison turned toward her slowly. "You recorded me?" Lily's voice was small but clear. "I recorded what happened." Madison's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Ethan looked at Lily and gave the faintest nod. Not approval as power, gratitude as a human being. Chairman Brooks continued. "Captain Hayes, are you present?" Hayes swallowed. "Yes, Mr. Chairman. Is the aircraft door still open?" "Yes, sir." "Good. This flight remains grounded until further notice. You will surrender operational control of this matter to our crisis response team at the gate." Hayes closed his eyes for one brief second. "Understood. Officer Mitchell?" Dana straightened. "I'm here. Thank you for not removing Mr. Walker." Dana glanced at Ethan. "The evidence did not support removal. That distinction may have saved this company from a much greater disaster." Madison flinched. The word company echoed in her mind. Not flight, not delay. Company. Only then did the full size of the mistake begin to appear. This was no longer about one first-class seat. It was about a culture, a policy, a pattern, a brand that had spent years selling comfort while quietly allowing humiliation to wear a uniform. Charles Bennett cleared his throat, desperate to separate himself from the wreckage. "Mr. Chairman, my wife and I had no idea this man was—" He stopped. He did not know what word to use. Important, connected, dangerous. Ethan turned his head. "This man," he said. Charles froze. The whole cabin heard the shame inside that phrase now. They had heard it all morning in different forms. "Sir," without respect. "Economy boarding is behind you. You people." "This man," Charles tried again. "I only meant we were misinformed. You were comfortable being misinformed when the misinformation gave you my seat." Margaret inhaled sharply. Charles looked down. There it was, the truth no one could dress up. Chairman Brooks spoke with a colder edge now. "Mr. Bennett, you will take your assigned seat or leave the aircraft. That decision will be made quietly and immediately." Charles' face reddened, but he sat down. Margaret followed. Madison looked as if she might be sick. "Mr. Chairman," she said suddenly, stepping toward the phone, "I need to explain. I was trying to manage a difficult boarding situation. I never intended for this to become about race or appearance or anything like that." Grace Miller's voice cut through the air, but it was. Madison turned. Grace sat upright, both hands folded over her purse. Her expression was not cruel. It was worse for Madison. It was disappointed. "You saw what you wanted to see," Grace said. And when the truth got in your way, you tore it in half. Madison's eyes filled, but the tears came too late. Ethan stood. The cabin seemed to shrink around him. He was still wearing the same black t-shirt, the same jeans, the same worn sneakers. Yet every person in first class now saw the suit he had chosen not to wear. The invisible one. Authority. Ownership. Judgment. He picked up the torn boarding pass from the armrest and held it in his hand. "Daniel," he said into the phone, "it's time they know why I'm here." Ethan held the torn boarding pass up where everyone could see it. "This," he said, "is why I'm here." The cabin did not move. Even the air vents seemed to quiet themselves. "My name is Ethan Walker. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Walker Global Holdings. My company owns a controlling interest in Summit Horizon Airlines." Madison made a sound that was not quite a gasp and not quite a sob. Tyler gripped the edge of a seat back. Captain Hayes lowered his head as if the ceiling had dropped onto his shoulders. Ethan's voice stayed low, controlled, merciless in its calm. "For 6 months, passengers have reported being judged by their clothes, their accents, their age, their skin, their income, and the way they looked when they walked into cabins they had every right to enter. Those complaints were softened, renamed, buried. I came here without a suit, without security, without warning, because I needed to know whether the reports were exaggerations." He looked at Madison. They were not. Madison's face crumpled. "Mr. Walker, I didn't know." Ethan's eyes hardened. "That is the problem. You thought you didn't need to know." No one rescued her from that sentence. Daniel Brooks's voice came through the phone again, cold and final. "Madison Reed and Tyler Brooks are removed from duty, effective immediately. Captain Hayes, you are relieved pending investigation. Officer Mitchell, please escort the involved crew members to the gate supervisor." Madison shook her head. "Please. I've worked here 14 years. Grace Miller whispered. "Then you had 14 years to learn better." Lily Parker turned away, tears slipping down her cheeks. Not from fear now, but from release. Dana Mitchell stepped beside Madison, her face professional but heavy. She did not touch her at first. She gave her the dignity Madison had refused Ethan. "Ma'am," Dana said, "it's time to step off." Madison looked once at Ethan, waiting for mercy. He gave her truth instead. "Power is not shown by how you treat people above you," he said. "It is revealed by how you treat people you think cannot hurt you." Madison lowered her eyes and walked toward the door. Tyler followed, pale and silent. Captain Hayes paused beside Ethan. "I am sorry," he said again. Ethan nodded once. "Then make sure your apology becomes evidence, not theater." The captain accepted the sentence like a verdict and left. A new crew arrived 20 minutes later. Quiet, shaken, careful. Charles and Margaret Bennett took their assigned seats without another word. Adam Collins stopped recording and wiped his eyes. Grace reached across the aisle and touched Ethan's sleeve. "You kept your dignity," she said. Ethan looked at the torn pass in his hand. "No," he said softly. "They tried to take it. They failed." When the plane finally pushed back from the gate, the sun was sinking over Chicago, turning the runway gold. Ethan sat in seat 2A, not as a billionaire, not as a headline, but as a man who had forced a hidden sickness into the light. And somewhere beyond that cabin, millions would watch and remember that respect should never depend on a suit, a seat, or a title. It should begin the moment a human being stands in front of you. If this story moved you, like, subscribe, and comment. Respect never fails. Top of form.